On Sport Unlocked, protecting footballers, the boss of the World Players Union on the impact of almost non-stop football as the Euros and Copa America begin.
There is obviously a risk that there will be more injuries than usual. That happens when you're fatigued. So I think there is a threat to the tournament that this will have a bigger impact than it should.
FIFPro chief Jonas Bär-Hoffmann also tells us why 5 substitutions could be allowed permanently, the action needed to reduce heading to limit the risk of footballers developing neurological diseases, and racism in the game. We'll also speak to Priara Power of the Anti-Discrimination Fair Network about players still being booed for taking a knee.
If you are booing an anti-racist gesture in England, then yes, you do stand accused of being racist.
Hello and welcome to the podcast, bringing you definitive analysis and insight and interviews into the week's sports news. I'm Rob Harris from the Associated Press, and alongside me as ever on Sport Unlocked is Martin Ziegler from The Times.
Hi, good to catch up again, Rob. It's we're now well into the first major football sporting event since international sporting event anyway since the pandemic. Where the Euro 2020 has finally started, and alongside us, we have the New York Times' Tariq Panja.
Morning, guys. Good to be with you again. And we're in a full pandemic mode tournament. Let's see if this runs smoothly. Any predictions?
Well, actually, my prediction is it's all going to go off fairly well, actually. I don't think there's going to be any major crises. I think things have sort of settled down. And I was looking at some of the figures around Europe, and actually it doesn't look like there's any major emergency situations in any of the 11 host countries. So personally, I think it's going to go off all right.
Maybe even a full final at Wembley, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, things are looking maybe towards that. Obviously, we're waiting for the big announcement from the British government on whether restrictions in England are completely eased up from June the 21st. That looks less likely. But I think the research is showing that outdoor events are safe from the various test events with large numbers of fans, and they're even allowing vaccine passports for all the Euros games at Wembley, so proof of having both jabs or a negative test. And I've actually spent the week around the England squad. Quite rare to have face-to-face access with players these days. The FA have managed to open things up, which certainly has not been the case with other teams. Spain have had their coronavirus cases in the squad, which actually meant they've had to get a second shadow squad and they've had to limit the access. But it's been interesting being at St George's Park, and it's been a bit of a theme of darts and beer. Maybe that sounds quite English. There's slightly unusual exchange this week with Declan Rice facing the media. That became a conversation about beer, and the surprise from some of the media, the fact he doesn't have a pint.
Interesting that, Rob. Yeah, it's but apparently he drinks spirits, so that's okay for your average footballer. No, but in terms of the venues at the Euros and the final at Wembley, even if the restrictions aren't eased on June the 21st, the government can still hold matches with more than 10,000 people because they're all part of the events research program. So they'll be effectively test events. So that's why I think we will, whatever happens, we will at least see Wembley half full for the semi-finals and the final. It might be a bit of a push to get a full stadium, but I think speaking to people in Whitehall and also within the FA, I think that they're sort of fairly confident they'll have a half full Wembley for the climax of the tournament.
And we're also seeing attendances up at other venues as well. Copenhagen, which was to host 16,000 fans, appears to have lifted that cap now to 25,000. So we might even see this kind of situation where attendances creep up all around the tournament as the situation changes. It would make it interesting from a ticketing perspective, from an organisational perspective. But as far as viewers and players and everyone involved would love more fans in the stadium than not. A chance to return to a bit of normality.
Yeah, interesting actually that Copenhagen, regionally, that's the venue which has seen the highest sort of regional infection rate. I mean, it's still 326 per 100,000 in that region, so it's not crazy, but they've certainly felt that they're still confident enough to raise the capacity to it's going to be basically 71% full there. looking around the 11 venues, there are a wide range of restrictions on how to get in, what you need to get into the stadium. As we said at Wembley, there's vaccine passports, and you have the same there in Bucharest and Budapest. But whereas if you look at Baku and Hampden Park, actually, you don't need anything. You don't even need a negative test. So it's quite interesting. There's a very, very wide range of restrictions depending where you are.
Yeah, interesting to see how many fans are there, and also what kind of atmosphere there'll be. Obviously, in England, there's been a build-up of, I suppose, relative negativity, or certainly a talking point about the players taking the knee and a section of supporters jeering them. We also had a situation at friendly in Hungary where the Republic of Ireland, who haven't qualified for the Euros, played in Budapest against Hungarians, who are one of the Euro hosts and one of the teams that will be in the tournament. And they were roundly jeered by Hungarian fans. And that led to the right-wing leader of Hungary criticising the Irish for not understanding the local culture. Do you think this is just going to be an issue throughout the tournament?
I mean, it seems to be the case, particularly around England fans who continue to boo taking a knee despite those pleas from Gareth Southgate and others to respect it. I mean, we covered it on the pod last week about the growing concerns, and yet it happened again in their game on Sunday against Romania. What I do find interesting is some of these fans who are complaining about apparent Marxist agendas and political motivations behind taking a knee and not wanting any politics around it. We've still got many fans in the middle of the national anthem chanting "No surrender," which of course is no surrender to the IRA. Deeply, massively political, unlike an anti-discrimination message.
I think there's I think it's suited certain areas of our politicians to portray the taking the knee as supporting the Black Lives Matter organization rather than the concept of Black Lives Matter, which is a completely different thing. I mean, Black Lives Matter, the organisation, is an English organisation. It's nothing to do with the movement that started in America, which people have been supporting after the George Floyd's death. So, and I think this has become it's actually a bit of a political football. We saw, I mean, it's a slightly different thing, but I mean, we saw the Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden weighing in about the cricketer Ollie Robinson's racist tweets which he sent when he was 18 and 19, saying that the ECB should think again and about their action. Actually, the ECB, all they've done is suspended him while pending a disciplinary hearing, so they've not actually taken any action against him. But it just seemed to me that this is very much a sort of a vote winner to try the so-called war on woke, which certainly certain politicians think is a way of winning a populist battle, and it just seems to me sport has been caught in the middle of that, which is very unfortunate.
And Oliver Dowden posted his tweet about Ollie Robinson saying the ECB had gone over the top in suspending him the morning after that action was taken pending the investigation. But Downing Street were far slower in condemning the booing of taking a knee. The second time it happened at the England games was on the Sunday, and it was only on Friday that Boris Johnson's spokesman said that the Prime Minister wants to see, quote, everybody get behind the team to cheer them on, not boo. So that was pretty delayed.
It's all quite tawdry, really, isn't it? So either here or Hungary or wherever, this issue is being used for the kind of needs of politicians, which has never really been the case, has it? Can you think of another time where we've had this level of intervention, where the culture secretary or the prime minister talks about whether someone should face a disciplinary sanction or not from a sporting body? I don't think I can.
I mean, it's completely unprecedented, and also setting a bad precedent, because it means that actually the government, Oliver Dowden, could be asked about a whole range of disciplinary cases being pursued by the Football Association or another governing body like the ECB as well, whether it's sort of more typical cases that are pursued against on-field matters during the seasons, or something like this. And, they do need to maintain that distance.
Do you remember anyone weighing in on those tweets from the Premier League footballer Andre Gray? He got a suspension. Maybe there was. Maybe I missed it, but I don't remember a politician weighing in on that one.
Yeah, from 2016, when I think it was old homophobic tweets came up. And, we obviously did discuss this on last week's pod, just about actually how should a sports entity punish any player over something like tweets from several years earlier. And in part, we see, perhaps in this Ollie Robinson case, which is ongoing, it will be assessed, was he a professional in cricket at the time? What was his exact involvement in cricket in that period? Joining us now is PR Power, the executive director of the Fair Network. They monitor discrimination across football. A return guest on the pod. PR, welcome back to Sport Unlocked.
Great to be here, Rob. Great to join this amazing little production you've got going on. I listen in every week, so good to be here.
Excellent. Well, one of the big issues as we enter these Euros is the concern about discrimination at games, whether that is booing of taking the knee or other forms of abuse. How troubling is it for you, and how sure are you that the authorities will clamp down on it?
We have the first big test of fans inside stadiums, given what's happened over the last year with the Black Lives Matter movement, with a sort of polarization, if you like, and the use of the sort of culture wars, if you like, are in full flow, particularly amongst right-wing politicians who don't like Black Lives Matter movement, don't like the way in which athletes have been speaking out quite actively over the past year. And we've seen that, of course, at England matches, the two England friendlies. And we've also seen it this week at the Hungary-Ireland friendly in Budapest. And what happened there actually is of concern, because we had the Hungarian FA tweeting the day before the match, presumably when they'd been told by the Irish Football Association or the Republic of Irish Football Association that their players wanted to take the knee. They tweeted that political acts are not allowed inside a stadium. And then, of course, I think it was 8,000 or 9,000 fans uniformly booed those players. And if you watch the footage, you hear the audio, it's pretty awful. It's very loud. So here are people who are making what many of us would see as a progressive gesture for racial equality. And you have every fan in the stadium, more or less, booing them. And it's no surprise, that the Irish coach and some of the Black Irish players have said that there should be action taken. And then that was followed up by Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, not a man known for his progressive perspectives, who said that the Irish had provoked the fans inside the stadium. So I think there's a lot of concerns. And if that's the sort of debate that we have coming up over the next sort of 5 or 6 weeks, there will be lots of particular matches that are of concern. We have it. France might kneel in Budapest when they play Hungary there. The Belgians might kneel in St. Petersburg when they play Russia. So those are two big issues. And then you have the internal issue here in England with some fans disliking the fact that the England players have been booing. And we'll see what happens there. But, predominantly, I think those matches are taking place at Wembley. So I think it will be a slightly different scenario. But this is the biggest concern we've got at the moment. And then on top of that, we might have fans who think that because there's less of them in the stadium, that they can sneak in far-right banners, that they can say and do things that they see themselves as picking up off from when football shut down from last.
When you're monitoring the matches, when FAIR is monitoring the matches during the Euros, will you report to UEFA if and when booing of taking the knee takes place? And have you come under any pressure? There has been suggestions that some of the Eastern European associations have asked UEFA to perhaps not monitor issues of discrimination quite so closely. Have you heard anything around that?
Well, look, so what we have is a situation where we have raised the issue of Hungary with UEFA. We've written to them and asked, and perhaps even suggested the articles that they could use to act to sanction Hungary. UEFA put out a very good statement this week where they asked fans to respect the taking of the knee. I think that was the right thing to do. But whether they take disciplinary action or not, which is quite effective in our view, we've yet to see. They do have the power to do that. There are articles which, frankly, you can sanction anyone for anything in football, really. So we've tried to put it into context, suggest the damage that it does, and we will do the same. I think we will note it as part of our observation process at the Euro. We're not at every single match because of COVID and travel restrictions and the difference in the host cities and the situation there, but we are at most during the group stages. Now, in terms of the bigger picture, we are talking to UEFA right now about our future relationship. And of course, there are clubs and big figures in football across Eastern Europe who don't like what we do because they see themselves as being unfairly attacked. In fact, I'm not sure this is just an Eastern European thing. This is something that is pervasive amongst many clubs and associations. If people get hammered, they don't like it, so they look to kill the messenger rather than the regulatory authority, which is UEFA. We hope that UEFA will understand the value of this system and will continue to work with them on it. But that's always a dynamic. We have in the past been criticized by the president of the Polish FA, by the president of the Hungarian FA, by the president of the Croatian FA, and many others. And, given the dangers of what some of our guys are doing, that's disappointing, but we've all got thick skins and we'll continue to do what we can as far as we can. If we can't do it within the system, then we'll have to do it outside of the system. But there's no way that we're going to sort of just pack up and go home.
But you said, at the start, you said there are some politicians and people who don't like the Black Lives Matter movement. But would it be too much then to say they don't like black people?
I think if you take an individual like Viktor Orban, where it's very clear cut what he likes and dislikes, he stands for a form of Hungarian nationalism, which is very clear cut, right? He's a populist. He believes in a greater Hungary, which sometimes will impede on territory that is currently within the country of Romania. He believes in a form of nationalism, which also then says that the LGBTIQ community don't have a role to play within that society, that they are, that it's a choice that people make rather than a lifestyle choice, rather than an identity that is intrinsic to them. He doesn't want Hungary moving from, as he puts it directly, a Christian country, and therefore was against Syrian refugees coming in. These are all statements of record. And he's framed, he's not so stupid as to say, I don't like black people, but his reference now is that we didn't have slaves, so why should we be involved in something which is an apology for slavery? Now, we know that the Black Lives Matter movement is far more complicated than that. And if you are a black person living in Hungary, and I happen to know 3 or 4, you will also know that life is quite difficult for them. This is not about slavery and whether Hungary was a colonial power or not, which it was, but of course they didn't have slaves, but it's far more complicated.
What about closer to home though? We get where Viktor Orban comes, but there's thousands of supporters at the Riverside Stadium on 2 consecutive occasions, I think, booed an England team that had a number of black or mixed race people of colour, and wearing the England shirt, same shirt as the fans are wearing, and they were getting booed. Is that racist?
If you are booing an anti-racist gesture in England, then yes, you do stand accused of being racist. I think that's a logical extrapolation, because why would you do that? They may be misinformed, but I think this argument that they're booing the Black Lives Matter organization doesn't wash, really. They don't like the fact that the identity of England is changing. They don't like the fact that a gesture such as taking the knee, which actually is a sporting gesture, has made its way into football. And I think that's unfortunate. It's something that, you have to praise the FA for the work they've done on this, through Gareth Southgate and his statements, his piece for the Tribune this week, the Players' Tribune. This is all really, really good stuff. And they're doing the best I think they can to educate people. Perhaps they'll have to be more aggressive in the coming weeks. We don't know. But I personally think that when we're back at Wembley, when England are back at Wembley, the situation will be slightly different. The people at the Riverside were England fans, were from the club, but they also would have been local to the northeast. And there's a slightly different dynamic there than there is in London.
a powerful piece that put together by the Players Tribune team. Piara, thanks a lot for joining us to provide some of those insights.
Okay, guys. Great to be here.
One of the other big issues of the week, the ongoing fallout from the Super League, sanctions being pursued in many directions. We've had the conclusion of the English investigation. The Premier League and FA matter is now drawn to a close. What we've seen is the 6 rebel clubs in the Premier League fined collectively £22 million. So, that's around £3.5 million each as a fine for Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Tottenham, Manchester United and Manchester City for accepting they were wrong to try to launch the breakaway, and it was them splitting from the project, which collapsed it ultimately in April. They also have already accepted those UEFA fines, effectively being deducted 5% of revenue for a single season, along with 3 of the other European clubs who backed out earlier on. So AC Milan, Inter Milan, and Atletico Madrid. But UEFA had been pursuing cases against Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Juventus because they were refusing to disavow the Super League. That case is on hold now, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really interesting, this, and it gets to the heart of where power lies in sport and where power will lie in sport. So this goes right back to the day of the launch of Super League. A few minutes before that midnight launch, the 12 clubs, as they were then, filed a motion in a Madrid court to injunct against FIFA or UEFA or any sports authority from taking action against them until the case could be heard, as it were. That would prevent UEFA from taking disciplinary action. They thought UEFA carried on because UEFA hadn't actually had the injunction delivered to them. It's kind of legal process. But last week, by the Swiss authorities, that court ruling landed on the desks of UEFA at Nyon and in Zurich at FIFA, although FIFA aren't pursuing anything in this case. And you would have thought, well, so what? So what if that Madrid judge has done this? UEFA are based in Switzerland. They should plough on. But there is a risk here, and I think that UEFA's lawyers have thought about it, and there's a personal risk here as well to people like Alexander Seferin, who, if they do pursue this, do run the risk, I don't know how high a risk, but a risk of being arrested if they travel to Spain or perhaps another EU country for ignoring this injunction. Now, UEFA have said they've stayed the disciplinary proceedings, which doesn't mean they're not going to happen, but they are now going to have to appeal this motion, this injunction that was made by the Madrid court to see where they go. So, as far as we're concerned, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus won't be punished, at least not for now, and will be playing in the Champions League next season. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was always the way it was going to go, to be honest. There's no surprise there for me, anyway. UEFA is still fairly confident that they're going to win the legal battle, both in Madrid and the European Court of Justice, and that eventually the rebel trio will get their punishments, which I'm sure by that time will mean that they get a Champions League ban imposed on them.
Yeah, well, how long are we talking? We could be talking years here if we're talking about an ECJ ruling.
Yeah, we could be talking 2 or 3 years, couldn't we?
I mean, one big difference seems to be, say, unlike the Manchester City case, which, of course, UEFA lost at CAS, which saw their Champions League ban being overturned. They don't seem to be giving up easily on this one. They don't seem happy to have lost this one, whereas we've seen perhaps in other cases where they just shrug their shoulders and say, well, we didn't succeed in that one. So with this, they didn't sort of accept the case being paused and say, well, better give up.
No, you're right. Which is, I'm not quite, still, I don't think anyone is still quite sure what their end game is, because actually, if you look at what's happening, certainly in England and also in Italy, measures have been taken to stop this any breakaway happening. For example, As part of the settlement agreement by the Big Six, they agreed there'll be a 30-point deduction from the Premier League if they join any unauthorised competitions. There's also a sort of remarkable, in some respects, agreement from the Home Office that the Football Association can revoke work permits for overseas players and managers if they take part in a breakaway competition. I mean, that's a remarkable development, I think, that the government should effectively authorise this kind of action. So I think what we are now facing, the rebel trio, is actually they haven't got anybody else who can join them, even if they win the court case.
Yeah, that's a really strong measure there. But Martin, what did you think? A lot of people were kind of sort of annoyed or frustrated with this language of the punishment, if you will, because it wasn't called a punishment. It was called, they have agreed to do X, Y, and Z, agreed to pay these crumbs for almost trying to blow up the Premier League. The idea that these fines, etc., or any type of disciplinary action within the Premier League is always kind of cooked up with the clubs, and they kind of have a say in how they're going to be punished, etc. To some people, that doesn't sit quite well. And then you've got those who are advocating an independent regulator, perhaps more power to their elbow now. When you see sort of deals cooked up, and yeah, everyone's fine. Is that okay? Not okay yet. Is that punishment okay to you, the person who has essentially broken the rule? Okay, we move on now. Is that how things should be?
The fact they called it a gesture of goodwill, the Premier League, rather than actually being fined, and we've seen the fines being redistributed amongst grassroots leagues, community programs. Was there a case that actually the money should be distributed to the clubs who didn't split from the Premier League to try to launch a breakaway?
The issue here is that disciplinary proceedings were never opened by the Premier League. This is why this is a settlement. So the Premier League board had to take the decision: do they open disciplinary proceedings formally? In which case, that's a sort of fairly lengthy process. It can be appealed. It's sort of fairly divisive. Or
not as divisive as leaving to join a breakaway Super League.
No, quite. So I suppose the decision everybody has to take is, what do you draw a line under it? Like it's the same that UEFA did. UEFA didn't.
No, I agree. I agree. But did they do enough? Did they do enough? There was a welcome letter to Manchester City within 5 minutes. Almost vaunting them as heroes of saving European football when they were part of a breakaway group. I mean, just to the outsiders, it does seem like you've done this. We wrote about it. The millions of people were reading about it. People were out in the streets. Old Trafford was fans were on the field, and it's like a little slap on the wrist. Is that how this should end?
Well, it depends. I think it's a pragmatic approach. It's do you want to bring in protections for the future? Do you want to try and draw a line under it, or do you want to have take it to and impose stricter punishments for what is the ultimate benefit of that? To me, the bigger punishment is the fact that a lot of these Super League clubs, they've lost much more. They've lost the goodwill of their fans. Their owners are under pressure. They're not going to be able to push for more money and more power in their domestic competitions anymore. They're going to have to, listen to the fans much more. I mean, we've already seen that, the Glazers, who've never spoken to the fans, popped up at a fans forum last week. So I actually think the punishments are unseen and much, much more damaging to the owners of these clubs than the sort of 3.6 million, which obviously is just a drop in the ocean.
I just find the money just seems pointless, really. And if they wanted to do something really important, wouldn't the right gesture maybe have been, I understand that the EFL clubs, they're down by 90 million. You got these 6 clubs, they could protect the pyramid that they were trying to destroy. Just something a bit more creative than just some cooked up number there. I don't know where 22 came from. Maybe 11v11 on a football pitch is 22 players. God knows. I just don't know where that number comes from.
And also the fact that as part of this settlement reached by the Premier League clubs with the league is the fact the punishments going forward if they were to try to launch another breakaway. The fact they would be dot 30 points and also fined £25 million. It points to the fact that it didn't think the existing regulations were robust enough and clear enough to be able to sanction a club for joining something like a Super League, maybe.
Clearly, in Spain they can't. In Spain, they've looked at their regulations and they've decided our regulations are so weak in this respect. We can only be unhappy. We can't do anything. So if you hear Tebas, etc., they were hoping UEFA would take the action. And that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean the big six clubs are insistent that they didn't actually break any Premier League rule. So so they would have absolutely fought a disciplinary process.
So much of that is the politics between clubs and governing bodies, and the most important people, apart from the fans, of course, the players who can actually be relied on to deliver the football in these competitions, whichever they are. And to get an insight now into the issues and challenges facing footballers, we're joined on Sport on Lot by Johannes Beer-Hoffmann. He's the General Secretary of FIFPro, the World Players Union. Jonas, welcome to Sport on Lot.
Thank you guys for having me.
Excellent. Well, obviously we've got the Euro starting. We've also got the Copa America too. Two huge moments for players at a really challenging time, particularly in South America, where there's been all sorts of uncertainty where the tournament would be held and the health concerns. And in Europe as well, with positive coronavirus cases in the Spain squad, the Sweden squads. It's not an easy time for players, is it, at the moment?
No, I mean, the entire, obviously, last 18 months, like the rest of society, but it's been quite a turmoil. And if you work like us in 65 countries around the world, it's not like Premier League everywhere. So there have been significant problems, and now leading into these tournaments, I mean, those are meant to be some of the pinnacles of a player's career, right? How often did you get a chance to play a Euro, play a Copa? And yeah, it's unfortunate circumstances, of course, and many of them will see their struggles probably throughout the tournament.
Jonas, on the fatigue factor there, this has been one of the most compressed seasons perhaps we've known. Is it a case of last man standing? Are you a bit worried about player injuries, player fitness, given how much they've already done in such a short period of time?
Yeah, we're concerned, to be honest. It's obviously, some of the changes that happened to the calendar of the last year were partially understandable, of course. I mean, Corona did, put a toll on it, and some responses were necessary. But this has been compiling for a few years. Corona now made it even more dense, even more compressed, like you say. And there is by now enough science that correlates this kind of overloading and the lack of recovery time with higher frequency of injury. The players are coming off a really intense year, and now you're going into a tournament where you play again. If you reach the later rounds, you play quite a number of games in a short period of time. So yes, there is obviously a risk that there will be more injuries than usual. Usually it's the kind of, the soft tissue pulling a hammy here and there that happens when you're fatigued. So I think there is a threat to the tournament that this will have a bigger impact than it should.
You're involved in some sort of conversation, though, with leagues or associations about maybe a minutes cap or something like that, where a player has a passport number of minutes that they can play, male or female, whatever, and that's a ceiling that you can use them how you want, but Mr. X or Miss X can play, I don't know how many thousand minutes a season, and it's just impossible to go beyond that. Is that something that might be the solution here?
Well, we actually had this week a meeting with FIFA, CONCACAF was there, the leagues were there, clubs were there, medical experts were there to discuss really the health component of the calendar and how that implicates the different tournaments. I think there's two ways to go about this. I mean, the one is that you just reduce matches until you get to a number that is manageable. But if you ask me, we've pushed probably too far to get back to it, because the number of games you would have to slash at every level would have such a significant economic impact that we need to do some of it, but it will not lead us to the glorified solution that everything's good. The other part, indeed, is regulation around it. A lot could actually already be achieved if we tackled mandatory off-season breaks, mandatory mid-season breaks, and some regulations around rest times in between games. And, some of the research we're doing looks at, the prevalence of games with less than 5 days of rest in between, which is sort of where you see the tipping point of increasing injury risk. And some of the elite players are up to 80% of their games that they play with 3 days rest or 4 days rest. And that number needs to come down. It doesn't have to be 5 days every time. There's also a benefit of load, of course, from a performance standpoint. But if it happens back to back to back weeks, it's just not going to be sustainable, and it's going to affect injuries and it's going to affect careers. So those are some of the things. And then you need to look at, you look at travel. How often do we really need to fly players all around the world for national team football, for pre-season and marketing tours and all these things? I think all of this needs to be looked at holistically.
Is the challenge that you've got competitions like UEFA with the expansion of the Champions League and other tournaments growing as well? You mentioned the pre-season tours. It's about teams and governing bodies trying to raise revenue, which is ultimately perhaps about satisfying the wage demands of players. And as they want to be paid more, then these entities need to bring the revenue in. So how do you balance that out?
Well, I think one thing I would say, which I think is completely lost sometimes in the conversation, is growth is not like commercial growth is not necessarily just a question of the number of games, right? I mean, Premier League revenue doubled over the last 10 years with the same number of games. The same happens in US sports. NFL doubled revenue in 10 years with the same number of games. So it's not necessarily just providing more to create more revenue. On the other hand, I mean, look, there's a very fair conversation to be had about balancing the health and balancing the commercial opportunities. And that the players, would see that too, I think is absolutely fair. If the market responds, if the market reacts, then the wages will too. But what I find problematic as a second point is that it's very much this blockbuster thinking. We push innovation, we push growth only at the top end. And we don't see the kind of attention further in the pyramid of the smaller leagues, the smaller competitions. And there actually we have a huge problem of quote unquote underload. The players don't get enough football. The clubs don't have enough football that is economically viable to grow the business and therefore provide the players with sustainable careers. So I think that's a bit disappointing. And I think that's a little bit why we have these breakaway conversations, because just the elite product, many people could market, right? It's a great product. Many people could sell this. But if we get back to the thinking of, okay, how do we strengthen the entire ecosystem? That's a lot more complex. And that's where the values-based conversation of sport, how we want to see it, comes back into the equation. And I think we've lost that attention. But again, also, how do we create more attractive football, women's football or lower league men's football? How do we create more influence there? Why, when this debate about 2-year World Cup comes out, everybody jumps at the men's side of the game, where probably most people will think it's not a great idea. In women's football, it's a very legitimate discussion to have more national team competitions so that federations actually put games on. And, we have this automatic drilling down to the elite men's game and not thinking a bit broader.
100%. You have someone on the Sport Unlocked pod who completely agrees with you on the fact the Women's World Cup should be played at least on a biannual basis, perhaps even more international games. The women's calendar, Jonas, seems to be designed with the men's football history in mind. Isn't it a blank sheet of paper for them at this stage?
It must be. I mean, for us internally, when we speak to players and their unions, it's two very different conversations. In the men's side, you have so much fixed structure and historic, standards around these competitions. You're just trying to manage around them. Whereas on the women's side, I agree. Like, let's take a white piece of paper, let's draw it up. And, in the women's side also, I think many competitions exist because there was a vacuum of organizing meaningful competitions by the FIFAs and by the confederations, etc. I mean, the She Believes and the Algarve Cup and all these things, they're good, but I don't think it's the future. The future needs to be more broader-based competitions. And what we see, of course, when you look into smaller countries in women's football, some of them don't play any football for a couple of years. The federations just don't even provide games because there are no competition structures that really mandate them to do so. So these players can't develop. These players will never be able to compete on the world stage because there is no consistency in it. So yeah, absolutely. It's two different conversations. And I think there's great opportunity in the women's game to do it differently, very differently.
One of the things FIFA Pro has spoken out about in the last year has been about having 5 substitutes. You supported that, and I think FIFPro said that they wished that the Premier League would have brought that in. Are you looking to make 5 substitutions a permanent, rather than just a sort of response to COVID, a permanent option for football?
I think it's a viable conversation that needs to be had. Yes, I think you need to. If we have, let's be honest, we're not going to all of a sudden have 20 less games of football in 2 years' time. We're still going to, even if we don't have increases, we still already have a large number of games. So you need to work on multiple layers. And one of the things that's quite interesting to see is there is some research about the intensity of the game as well. And some of the statistics suggest that the distance of sprints in a game over 7 years have gone up 30 to 50%. So it's not just the minutes, it's what they do while they're on the pitch. There's more impact, there's more high-speed situations. And of course, that means there's greater fatigue. And if you have more ability to swap players during the matches, it's one thing that can contribute. And I think it's certainly a conversation that needs to be had. Squad management, I think, needs to change. Clubs need to put maybe not necessarily just bigger squads, but deeper squads, so you can distribute minutes amongst more players who are of similar status.
There's been research in this country and in the United States mainly about dementia and concussion involved in football, and certainly in concussion, that the fact that female players are more likely to suffer concussions than male players. And then there's been links apparently demonstrated amongst Scottish footballers historically that they are more likely to develop dementia or neurological diseases. What's FIFPro's position on this whole issue of concussion and female concussion, and also the heading? Do you think there should be restrictions on heading, not in the game necessarily, but in training?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, we've been pushing, I think, for a good decade now to change the regulations around this, the way that we diagnose and the framework that we provide to doctors to diagnose concussions. We still operate on 3 minutes in the middle of a stadium, maybe 50,000 people yelling around you. And we're behind the gold standard that other sports have put in place for a long time, whether it's rugby, whether it's the US sports, to have temporary substitutions, to take the players off, give the doctors a real chance of a diagnosis, maybe pull in a neurological expert who may see things that a general physician or a sports physician doesn't see. Football has been very slow, and we've been frankly quite frustrated that even now these trials, where England is at least at the forefront of driving them, but that they didn't trial at the same time temporary substitutions and permanent substitutions. We thought that was a poor decision, and if we now find out that the permanent substitutions are not the solution, then we're going to spend another 18 months to study if temporary substitutions are the solution. It's disappointing. With regards to your question on the heading, I mean, our take is just, look, be on the side of caution. If you don't know for sure, if you don't think all the science is there, well, then go with caution. And if there are reasonable ways of limiting in training for young kids, for girls growing up, for female players to limit it in training, why not? I mean, I don't think we're losing a lot in terms of the game's development if we put these restrictions in, to just be on the side of caution, because there is more and more evidence. There are more and more cases. And yes, these are oftentimes still older players where you have different factors, but I think there's enough there. I think we've seen enough science, we've seen enough cases that should put everybody on the alert that we need to be cautious. And so yes, if that means restricting it in training, looking at how we teach heading to young kids, etc., definitely let's have that on the table, and let's put some good restrictions in, because you don't want to be on the other side of saying, yeah, we weren't sure, so we kept it going. And then in 3 years' time, we have the next study and it says, yep, there was the reason, there is the correlation. And all of a sudden, you've done what you've done and you can't reverse the time again.
A big issue for FIFPro and for players over the last year or so in particular has been tackling discrimination. We've had the social media boycott. We've had players, particularly in England, taking a knee. The fear is, of course, that particularly the England players are being booed. just what does this tell us about the struggles facing players still in the fight against discrimination?
Watching it is disheartening, really. And the whole rhetoric around it, that there is some other political agenda, that there is some objective that has nothing to do with fighting racism and fighting for equality, and not taking the players by their word that it is. I can't comprehend it, and it just tells you that there's a very, very long way to go. And I think it's, people say it doesn't achieve anything. Well, it achieved something. We're talking about it for a year now. We're asking questions about how far the game has come, how far society has come. It's uncomfortable, which is what protest is meant to be. If protest is conforming with a majority view of, not being too disturbing, it's not protest. And I mean, I think the players have shown incredible leadership, which frankly, the game itself, the administrators have been lacking for a long time, to respond to it more vigorously, to really look at representation, look at where this 3-step protocol works. I don't think it does. There's a lot that could have been done a long time ago to put better mechanisms in place, and the game hasn't. And I think you look at it across various issues now, whether it's been Qatar and the players speaking out about human rights, whether it's racism and discrimination, the players speaking out, whether it's gender equality, the players leading on that. It's more and more the athletes and their activism that push the game into that next stage of consciousness and social engagement, and actually holding it maybe accountable to the values that we say the game and sport in general have, but don't necessarily always live up to them. And the athletes are changing that, and I think that's where it's going to be in the future.
Jonas, it's been great to get some of your insight to reflect some of the views of the players. Thanks for joining us on Sport Unlocked.
No, thank you guys. It's been a great conversation.
Turning now to something quite familiar in the world of sport, an uncontested election for the presidency of a governing body. So who is the new boss of world swimming, who we should be seeing handing out medals by the pool at the Tokyo Olympics?
Captain Hussein Al-Musallam is become the new president of FINA, the International Swimming Federation. Now, the captain is well known as the main aide, the number 2 to Sheikh Ahmed of Kuwait. Tell us more, Tarek.
These two figures appeared in another US indictment against a football official from Guam, who was found to have pocketed about $1 million and was found guilty of this. I think he pleaded guilty to this case in the States. But in the indictment, very, very identifiable are Sheikh Ahmed, you mentioned, a major Olympics and football power broker. So swimming can lay the claim to being run by unindicted co-conspirator number 3, the captain. Isn't the world of sport and sports governance wonderful?
I mean, it just does reinforce the perhaps lack of determination at all by sports bodies to root out people who are accused of wrongdoing. And we see the same figures popping up across sport continuously.
They both deny wrongdoing. We've got to make that clear, of course.
Absolutely. I mean, so Hussein Al-Musallam, one of the things he's done after being elected, he's set up a reform committee to look at the reform structures, and not a single woman on the reform committee, which is rather surprising given the fact that so many of the elite swimmers are female. Why is there not a single woman on that? It's just ridiculous. We've also had Maddie Groves, the Australian swimmer, pulling out of the Olympic trials because she said she is fed up with misogynistic perverts in the sport. So not surprisingly, Swimming Australia have been pitched right into the middle of a massive row there, especially in Australia where swimming is such a big sport. And I think it's a very concerning point, not just for swimming in Australia, but for the sport as a whole. And talking of Australia and the Olympics, we have news about Brisbane and 2032.
Yeah, well, we've covered this in one of the other editions of Pod about how the Queensland area was awarded effectively the Olympics for 2032 without the usual big bidding contest, rivalries around the world, inspections in multiple countries, lots of consultants and PRs trying to sell the case. And now it is a done deal. The fact Brisbane will be hosting the 2032 Olympics, and a lot of success for John Coates, an IOC man who is Australian himself.
This whole situation just shows up sports governance in a way. You could say from the IOC's point of view, they have certainty of hosts, and they've got from their point of view, pretty easy hosts now after Tokyo and Beijing coming up for winter. You're going to have Paris, Los Angeles, and almost certainly Brisbane. The only thing that now has to happen is a 50% plus one vote from the IOC members, which is pretty much certain. They never dissent when the executive committee suggests something. And you mentioned John Coates. John Coates actually designed the blueprint for this new system where the IOC gets to pick a preferred host candidate. Is Brisbane. So he's the head of the Australian Olympic Committee. He designed the IOC process that ends with Brisbane getting the hosting rights. And that's all seen as perfectly normal in the world of sport. Rhine-Ruhr, the German region, they were hoping for it. They didn't get a look in at all. What do you think of this situation, Martin?
I mean, I don't think anyone's suggesting Brisbane can't do a great job, and got lots of good venues, some from the Commonwealth Games. It's just that it's whether other people are getting a proper look in, a proper opportunity to bid, and there's far less transparency around that than there has ever been before.
If you've got any thoughts on that, always great to hear. What should the IOC have done over this games process? Is it better to do away with these expensive bidding contests or not? Your feedback, you can tweet us, Facebook us, Instagram us. We're at Sport Unlocked. We're also sportunlockpod@gmail.com. And we have had some feedback from the listeners, haven't we, Martin?
Yeah, we had a couple of messages about mainly positive, I have to say. But we have a couple of people sort of raising their eyebrows at our discussion about the tennis player Naomi Osaka, suggesting we weren't perhaps as sympathetic to her mental health as we perhaps could have been. Probably me, actually. I was suggesting that professional sports people had a duty to take into account the fact that the media actually funds a lot of their salaries indirectly. Fair point, absolutely. Maybe we should have given Naomi more of an understanding in terms of her mental health.
It's been interesting being around the England football camp this week to see some of the men there. It's been quite a rarity being face to face with players in this pandemic, something that hasn't happened like this for some time, obviously due to the coronavirus restrictions. And it's interesting how at ease actually the players are and actually open to engaging and see it as a way of connecting with the fans almost. Whereas we'll know from going back maybe 10 years ago, particularly around an England team, the players would be so reticent to talk to the media and they'd have to put up the same few players on rotation because the whole squad wouldn't do so.
Before we go, Tarek, I think you've got some very important news about your pigeon.
Yeah, the Martin, huge news. So the pigeon problem has escalated somewhat. I was woken in the early hours of Thursday morning, shortly after, I think, about 4 a.m. to the sort of gurgling sound of pigeons. And I thought, well, where's that coming from? And I thought, it must be on I've got a balcony, must be there. So I went through the living room and there they were, a couple of pigeons just sort of walking around my living room. I mean, I really don't know what to do. So, we've mentioned the post bag. If anyone out there, and I mean absolutely anyone, knows what I can do to rid myself of this pigeon nightmare, please write in. What are the various ways of getting in touch, Rob?
Yeah, say sportunlockpod@gmail.com, at sportunlocked on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. And if you can, please rate, review and subscribe to us. So it means that we just land in your podcast feed and we're there every episode, hopefully.
I think you've achieved something of a coup there with your pigeons, Tarek.
Zeeks. On that bombshell.
The Sports News podcast that always brings you the bigger stories. For everyone, thanks again for listening and enjoy the sports viewing in the days ahead. Goodbye for now.